We will have to improvise because we're competing with the coffee break and we can't miss the coffee break, so we'll have to leave some of the questions and answers to the actual coffee break. But what we would like to do is, we'd like to propose the following compromise. 3 of the 6 experts that Andrea mentioned haven't had a chance to briefly make statements on what they consider to be really essential and very, very important for the sharing of data across Europe and for ELRC. And what we'd like to propose is to give them the floor for a few minutes to just say kind of like, some of the aspects that they consider important, and then to see how that resonates with you as an audience. This was supposed to be the really interesting part where we have questions from you and we can answer these questions, but I would propose to leave that part for the coffee break. So please sort of like grab the experts, discuss the questions among yourselves. And to get the whole process going, can I ask Pierre Zweigenbaum first to kick off and start? Pierre, as Andrea mentioned already, is an expert in anonymization, and data anonymization can be a big stumbling block that can prevent the provision of data. So Pierre, over to you.
Good morning, I'm Pierre Zweigenbaum from l'IMSI in Paris, France. I've been involved in natural language processing of health data, of patient records, and obviously this is a domain where privacy is very important. And for us, even as natural language processing researchers, to work with such data, we first have to deal with the de-identification process, where we remove as much as possible identifying information. So this is a process which has been addressed in several countries. The most advanced place for this is the United States, where there are clear legal rules for removing protected health information, and already some data sets which can be obtained in very restricted conditions, which are de-identified. So I'd like just to put this forward to you, that such a kind of process can be first partly automated by natural language processing tools, continued just like in machine translation with the post-processing by humans, and that then the data can be disseminated in specific conditions with data use agreements, which make sure that the parties which use the data promise not to try to re-identify it. So there can be such an organization where both automated tools, human assistance, and legal contracts can make sure that the data can be used for such purposes in some way.
Thank you, Pierre. Let me hand over to Stelios Piparidis. Stelios has been with ELRC from the very, very beginning. He has run countless workshops in large parts of Europe. I'm sorry, so Stelios has been with us since the very, very beginning. He's been running countless workshops in large parts of Europe. He's a very experienced collaborator on the project. And Stelios, what would be some of the main points that you consider essential in this context?
Yeah, right. So as Josef said, yeah, I've been traveling through Europe with the ELRC flag, mainly responsible for the southeastern part of Europe. But since most of the workshops are almost completed, we just have 2 to go. And since we have discussed internally, I would like to raise 3 points that somehow, in my view, aggregate the issues that we feel that translators and translation services in the public institutions in the member states face. Number 1, data management and data organization. It looks as if in many cases, and in our case this is in many countries, translation services are scattered all over the place, with few exceptions. This creates a terrible overhead for organizing, but mostly for capitalizing on the translation capital, on the knowledge capital that is generated daily in this scattered manner. In some cases, even when translation is entrusted with a single body in a government, it seems that within this single body, again, you have some sort of decentralized, decentralized fashion, I would say, not structure, because structure would entail that at the end of the day you can get something out of it quite easily. This is not always the case. We know what you suffer from. So in many cases, especially when we are after parallel data, translated translation corpora, etc., we've been discussing cases where the source documents are somewhere, the translations are somewhere else, and you need some sort of methodology and later on technology to match these things and generate what we call a proper translation memory. So data management and data organization, these two examples, but this would be the first bullet. The second bullet would be formatting, and formatting, especially for the colleagues that come from the language technology area, is not something new, but I can trust me, my dear colleagues from the language technology area, there are even worse cases where you have corpora that are presumably parallel, but one is PDF, the other is doc or any other sort of format, which means that any sort of tool that we know of would not directly work. So various formats for source documents, various formats for translation documents. It is not the rule, but it is not a non-negligible percentage of the cases. Also, different formats for representing translated data. In many cases, we believe that TMX is the standard. Yes, TMX is the standard, but there are a whole lot of proprietary formats out there, and we've come to grips with some of them. And it is really, you have to go through an ordeal to standardize and convert to TMX. So again, here we have a sort of stumbling block. And of course, Oudhans, the Irish colleague, gave this very nice presentation, and you've all seen that wonderful slide with this very rich lexical resource that needs to be parsed by multiple parsers to extract information out of the original resource. So, three cases for this second bullet: formats. Formats is the second stumbling block. And of course, the third stumbling block is legal framework. I've been going through 11 different countries in the same area, and I'm pretty certain that I've heard 11 different transpositions of the PSI directive. This does not mean that the PSI directive does not solve 90% of the problem. The only thing that I wanted to say is that we could have made our life much, much easier if we could have coordinated better the transposition process in the different countries. But PSI seems to be the nicest possible remedy. It constitutes a safe harbor for what we want to do here in ELRC. Private data is an issue. Anonymization is a solution. Anonymization is not perfect, we know. Pierre already confirmed that. And the last point is that sometimes we felt that there is a bit of uncertainty, and this uncertainty may not be necessarily rooted in the legal framework complexities. It may have to do with relations within the hierarchy in different countries, etc. But exactly for this reason, we have suggested, as Khalid explained, a particular process where we somehow intrude into the nicest possible point in the government, and we generate a message that is percolated to all the responsible officials. It is something that we have successfully done, I believe, in Greece. I see the public national anchor point of Greece smiling happily. And maybe this is something that can be repeated in other places. So this is all. Data organization, data management, formats of data and legal framework.
Okay, thank you very much, Stelios. The final colleague I would like to call on is Andres Vasiljev. He is the chairman and co-founder of Tilde. Andres, is there anything left after Stelios' extensive...
Yeah, that was really extensive, and I fully support what Stelios said. But I also want to emphasize what we learned from a number of workshops, what we organized with your help in a number of countries, that there's a tremendous pressure on public administrations and on you to process and deal with a growing amount of information and the need to provide translations almost immediately. And there's a lot that public administrations can learn from industry. And this morning we had a nice presentation from the language translation and localization company in Poland. And there are many other companies that embrace possibilities of translation automation of language technologies that help them to speed up the process and improve efficiency. And there are actually not so difficult things that are well elaborated that you can take from the industry, how to organize this process. First is to use CAT tools, computer-assisted translation tools, and there are a number of these tools, and some of them are very affordable, and some of them are even free. And the best option is to set up the system where every translation, what is done, is stored in translation memories. So if the same sentence appears again in another document, you do not need to spend time and efforts to translate it again, that you benefit from your previous translations. This seems obvious, but in many institutions, still translations are being redone and redone and redone again. So please look at assess, do your institution use translation tools, and do you collect translation memories and reuse those memories? Because sometimes these translation memories are fragmented and scattered around, but by collecting them and using on the same, providing access to these memories to all the people who deal with translations, you will get immediately huge benefits. And when these translation memories are the most essential resource for machine translation, and this is the cleanest and the best parallel data, what is very valuable for improving machine translation. And again, as you learned this morning, and as you can see in other examples, machine translation could be easily integrated into these translation tools, so translators can instantly get benefit from machine translation assistance. And it's not just that machine replaces human. Translator is in charge of what he or she is doing. And then another aspect is that many public institutions outsource translation to translation companies. And again, when industry players outsource translation, they always required translation memories to be returned back as a part of delivery, as part of translation job. It's already a part of the standard contracts in the industry. But this is not the case in public administrations. You just get back your translated documents, but translation memories are lost. So what I encourage you is to check and to include and to request in all your outsourced translations, translation work, that translation memories are returned back to you, because almost all translation companies use translation tools, and they do have these translation memories created as part of the work that they do for you. and you have paid for this work, so that you own that translation memory, and you have to ask it and to include in the contract this provision. And when you will benefit from this memory immediately, because when you will redo new translations, when you will do not need to repeat and to pay again for the same sentences. Simple things. Industry have excellent practice elaborated on these, and encourage you to use this best practice. Thank you.
Andres, Stelios, Pierre, thank you for these important points. I think they're well received. And with these points and a lot to think about, I release you into the coffee break.